The wedding guests couldn't believe what they were seeing when the bride slowly pulled her hand away from the groom as if even touching him would stain her reputation. The poor single father stood there in a simple gray suit that had clearly been tailored years ago, holding the tiny bouquet his little daughter had picked with her own hands, while the bride looked at him with open disgust. The whispers spread through the bright afternoon ceremony like wildfire. She had been forced into the marriage to protect her family's collapsing business, and she wanted everyone to know she hated every second of it. What no one, not even she, knew was that the quiet single dad she had just humiliated owned fortunes hidden behind ordinary clothes and controlled more wealth than almost anyone on earth. Before we continue, if you believe kindness is always stronger than pride, and that forgiveness and second chances can change lives, please like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe to our channel to become part of our community. The groom was named Graham Mercer, a widowed father whose entire world revolved around his 7-year-old daughter, Elsie. Since losing his wife years earlier to a sudden illness, Graham had chosen a life so simple that most people assumed he struggled to pay his bills. He drove an old pickup covered with scratches, lived in a modest farmhouse on land his family had owned for generations, and spent every afternoon walking Elsie home from school himself. The truth, however, was hidden beneath decades of careful decisions. Graham had inherited an enormous international investment empire from his grandfather, but after witnessing how greed destroyed relatives and friendships, he quietly transferred daily operations to trusted executives while living anonymously. His name appeared nowhere on magazine covers. Interviews were refused. Awards were declined. His only joy came from raising Elsie with humility. The bride, Corinne Ellsworth, had been raised in luxury. Her father once owned one of the country's most respected construction companies, but years of reckless expansion, hidden debt, and disastrous investments had brought the family to the edge of bankruptcy. The only salvation was a complicated legal agreement written decades earlier between Graham's grandfather and Corinne's grandfather. If both families ever faced financial collapse, their heirs would unite through marriage, protecting ownership of shared properties that neither family could legally sell separately. It sounded like something from another century, yet the contract remained enforceable. Corinne hated every word of it. She had imagined marrying a successful executive, a politician, or perhaps a famous entrepreneur. Instead, she believed she had been sentenced to spend her life with a struggling widower who seemed incapable of providing the lifestyle she believed she deserved. Throughout the afternoon reception, she barely acknowledged Graham's existence. When guests approached to congratulate them, she accepted every compliment alone while Graham quietly stood nearby holding Elsie's hand. Several guests even assumed he was merely a family friend until someone corrected them. The embarrassment deepened every time Corinne politely stepped farther away from him. Graham noticed everything but refused to respond with anger. Elsie noticed even more. Children often understand emotions adults try to hide. As the afternoon sun warmed the garden, Elsie quietly asked why her new stepmother looked so unhappy. Graham gently smiled and told her that sometimes people carry fears they haven't learned how to express. He kissed her forehead and promised that kindness should never depend on how others treated them. Those words would remain with Elsie forever. The first weeks of marriage became increasingly painful. Corinne moved into the farmhouse only because the legal agreement required it for 12 months before any financial restructuring could begin. She constantly criticized everything she saw. The furniture looked outdated. The kitchen seemed too ordinary. The truck embarrassed her. She complained that Graham lacked ambition because he spent mornings gardening, afternoons volunteering at the local community center, and evenings helping Elsie with homework. She never realized that every afternoon, while sitting beneath the old oak tree reading storybooks to his daughter, Graham quietly approved billion-dollar investments through secure messages sent to his private advisors. The world's largest executives waited patiently for replies from the man everyone in town believed was barely getting by. Meanwhile, Corinne desperately searched for ways to escape the marriage early. She met lawyers, accountants, and former business partners, hoping someone could invalidate the agreement. Every meeting ended with disappointment. Then another surprise arrived. Her father's company officially entered insolvency proceedings. Newspapers predicted complete liquidation within weeks. Corinne blamed Graham for everything. She convinced herself that if she had married someone wealthy, her family's name would already have been saved. One bright afternoon she exploded with frustration in front of several employees visiting the farmhouse to inspect old documents. She mocked Graham's clothes, laughed at his weathered boots, and cruelly suggested that the only valuable thing he owned was sympathy from people who pitied single fathers. The workers looked uncomfortable. Graham simply lowered his eyes and continued repairing Elsie's bicycle. His silence somehow made the humiliation even heavier. The following week, Corinne received an invitation to attend an emergency board meeting regarding her father's company. She assumed the remaining directors planned to announce final bankruptcy. Instead, she entered a conference room filled with international investors, respected attorneys, and financial leaders from around the world. Everyone suddenly stood, not for her, for Graham. He entered wearing the same modest suit she had mocked countless times. Yet every executive greeted him with unmistakable respect. Some even thanked him for attending personally, explaining that they rarely had the privilege of meeting him face to face. Corinne felt the room begin spinning. The chairman calmly announced that Graham Mercer, through multiple holding companies and charitable foundations, owned controlling interests across industries ranging from renewable energy and transportation to healthcare, technology, and infrastructure. His personal wealth exceeded that of nearly every investor present. More astonishing still, he had quietly purchased the majority of her father's debts months earlier, preventing thousands of employees from losing their jobs without ever revealing his identity. She could barely breathe. Every assumption she had built about her husband collapsed in seconds. The chairman continued by explaining that Graham had deliberately hidden his fortune because he believed generosity lost its meaning when performed for applause. He preferred helping communities anonymously rather than collecting headlines. Corinne remembered every insult, every cold glance, every humiliating moment, and suddenly none of them could be erased. After the meeting, journalists gathered outside hoping for statements from the mysterious billionaire who almost never appeared publicly. Graham ignored every camera and instead walked toward Elsie, who had been coloring quietly in the lobby while waiting for him. He smiled only when she proudly showed him her drawing of their little farmhouse surrounded by flowers. Corinne watched from a distance. For the first time, she noticed what wealth had never been able to buy: peace, patience, love. The following afternoon she returned home carrying tears instead of pride. She expected Graham to celebrate his secret victory over her arrogance. Instead, she found him planting new flowers beside Elsie. Neither mentioned the meeting, neither mentioned the newspapers now calling him one of the world's greatest hidden philanthropists. Graham simply offered Corinne a pair of gardening gloves. She hesitated before quietly kneeling beside them. For hours they planted flowers without speaking. Sometimes healing begins with silence. Days turned into weeks. Corinne slowly discovered the countless lives Graham had transformed. The local children's hospital had been renovated through anonymous donations that came from him. Scholarships helping hundreds of struggling students existed because of him. Food banks, shelters, libraries, medical research centers, and disaster relief programs had all quietly received support from foundations he controlled without attaching his name. Yet the greatest surprise remained his relationship with Elsie. Every afternoon, regardless of business emergencies or financial crises, Graham stopped working to spend uninterrupted time with his daughter. They baked bread together, visited elderly neighbors, repaired broken toys for children, and volunteered at animal shelters. His calendar protected those hours more fiercely than billion-dollar negotiations. Corinne began joining them. At first Elsie remained cautious, remembering the coldness shown during the wedding. Children forgive slowly because they love honestly. One afternoon, while helping paint birdhouses for a community fundraiser, Corinne accidentally spilled paint across her clothes. She expected embarrassment. Instead, Elsie giggled so hard that she accidentally splashed paint across Graham's shirt too. Within minutes all three were laughing together beneath the warm afternoon sunshine. It was the first genuine laughter Corinne had shared in years. Later she quietly admitted to herself that happiness felt strangely different from luxury. Luxury impressed strangers, happiness stayed when everyone else left. Months passed, and Corinne dedicated herself to rebuilding not her family's fortune but its reputation. Rather than asking Graham for money, she requested guidance. He agreed on one condition: every decision must benefit employees before investors, every success must improve communities before expanding profits, every contract must protect honesty before increasing revenue. Corinne accepted. The transformation was difficult, old habits resisted change, there were moments when fear tempted her to chase shortcuts again. Whenever that happened, she remembered Graham repairing Elsie's bicycle while enduring humiliation without anger. Strength no longer looked like winning arguments, strength looked like choosing compassion when pride demanded revenge. Under Graham's mentorship, the reconstructed company became smaller but far stronger. Former employees returned because they trusted its values. Customers returned because promises were finally kept. Investors returned because integrity proved more profitable than deception. One sunny afternoon, exactly 1 year after their uncomfortable wedding, the community gathered for the reopening of a children's learning center funded jointly by Graham's Foundation and Corinne's company. This time, when cameras pointed toward them, Corinne reached for Graham's hand first. She held it proudly, not because he was the richest man alive, because he had become the richest soul she had ever known. Before the ribbon-cutting ceremony, Corinne publicly admitted that she had once judged a man's worth by appearances, wealth, and status. She confessed that the greatest poverty she had ever experienced was not financial but emotional. Pride had blinded her. Kindness had opened her eyes. Many people in the audience wiped away tears, especially those who remembered the painful wedding. Before we reach the end of this story, tell us in the comments, have you ever discovered that someone's true value was completely different from your first impression? Your words might encourage someone else to choose kindness over judgment. As the afternoon sun stretched gently across the garden surrounding the learning center, Elsie ran ahead carrying another small bouquet she had picked herself. This time Corinne knelt beside her, helped arrange every flower, and together they placed the bouquet into Graham's hands. It reminded him of the lonely bouquet from their wedding day, except now it carried acceptance instead of rejection. Graham looked at his wife and daughter, realizing that the greatest fortune he possessed had never been hidden inside investment accounts or company shares. It lived in forgiveness freely given, trust patiently rebuilt, and a family that had chosen love over pride. Corinne understood that some people wear expensive suits to appear important, while others wear ordinary clothes because they have nothing left to prove. The richest man alive had never needed the world to know his wealth. He only needed the people he loved to know his heart. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. Remember, the greatest treasures in life are not the ones people can see, but the kindness, humility, and forgiveness we choose to give when they matter most.